They told me to water the plants and make sure the doors were locked twice, like I was a dependable piece of furniture. Useful, familiar, and easily left behind. You'll be more comfortable here, Mom, my son said, already halfway down the steps. Long flights are exhausting at your age. At your age. He said it gently, like it was a kindness. Their van pulled away, heavy with suitcases, laughter spilling through the open windows. Talk of blue water, warm nights, food they'd post photos of later. Greece? They'd said. A family vacation. Apparently, I was no longer considered family enough to come along. I stood there waving until the street went quiet again. I didn't cry. I'd learned long ago that tears made people uncomfortable. Silence was easier for everyone. The next morning, I found the envelope in my mailbox. Plane tickets. 4 of them. Seats together. Departure in 3 days. Not mine. I stood in the kitchen holding that envelope like it belonged to someone else. The kettle screamed before I realized I'd forgotten to turn it off. I poured the water anyway, hands shaking slightly, because when something hurts at my age, you don't collapse. You make tea. You sit. You wait for the feeling to settle. It didn't. I found my old address book, pages soft from decades of use, and called the travel agency. My voice sounded calm even as my chest felt hollow. I need to cancel these tickets, I said. The girl hesitated. May I ask why? No, I replied. She cancelled them. When the call ended, I sat in the armchair across from the fireplace. Paul's photograph watched me from the mantel. He'd been gone 20 years now, but I could still hear what he would have said. Helen, they don't get to decide when your life ends. I hadn't always been invisible. I'd been a wife, a mother, the organizer of birthdays, the woman who remembered everyone's allergies and favorite colors. Somewhere along the way, I'd become background noise. Grandma will understand. I always did. I opened the drawer where I kept my passport. Still valid. I checked my savings. Enough? More than enough. For the first time in years, there was no one who needed me to stay. I booked a ticket. 1 seat. Aisle. Athens. Then I called my neighbor and asked her to water the plants. I packed lightly. Shoes that wouldn't betray me. A scarf I loved but rarely wore. And the navy dress I hadn't touched since Paul's funeral, not because it made me sad, but because it made me look like someone who still mattered. The night before I left, I sat on the porch listening to the quiet hum of the street. I imagined their faces when they realized. The confusion. The irritation. Maybe even worry. For once, I didn't stay awake rehearsing explanations. The airport was louder than I remembered, full of movement and people convinced they belonged somewhere. I walked like I was one of them, even when the gate agent gave me that practiced smile reserved for elderly travelers. Enjoy your flight. I didn't answer. I didn't need permission. On the plane, the seat beside me filled at the last moment, a man about my son's age. He asked if I was traveling alone. Yes, I said. He smiled. Brave? I almost laughed. If only he knew how long it took to reach the point where bravery was simply refusing to stay behind. I slept in short stretches, waking once as the sun spilled over the Mediterranean. Blue? Everywhere. Endless. Unapologetic. That's when it hit me. I hadn't come for sightseeing. I had come because someone told me I shouldn't. Athens welcomed me with heat and noise and a sense of being utterly unknown. The pension was small but clean. The woman at the desk called me madam like it meant something. That evening, I walked only a few blocks, ate bread and olives at a tiny cafe, and didn't check my phone once. No messages came anyway. Back in my room, I stood at the window listening to the city breathe. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be included. I was already gone. And I didn't yet realize this trip wasn't about distance, it was about what would happen. When the people who left me behind finally noticed I was no longer where they'd put me. Because when they did notice, everything would change. Athens didn't rush me. That surprised me. Cities usually demand something: speed, attention, proof that you belong. But here, the light arrived softly through wooden shutters, and the street below woke up like it had nowhere urgent to be. I stood at the window longer than necessary, listening to cups clink and a man argue cheerfully with a cat. I realized I hadn't slept that deeply in years. I dressed slowly, deliberately. Comfortable clothes, the scarf at my neck. Then, almost without thinking, I reached for the lipstick at the bottom of my bag. A muted rose. I hadn't worn it since the world started expecting me to fade politely. I put it on anyway. At breakfast, I chose a small table near the window. Buttered toast. Strong coffee. Across from me sat a woman about my age, posture straight, silver hair pinned back. With authority rather than vanity. She watched me spread the butter. "You're too cautious," she said, not unkindly. I looked up, amused. "Years of habit." She nodded. "Waste of good butter." That was how Rosalie entered my life. She was French. Retired. Widowed. Said all three things like they were facts, not apologies. She traveled alone because, as she put it, waiting for others was how she'd lost 10 years already. We walked together after breakfast, not far, just enough to let the city reveal itself. She noticed details I'd forgotten to look for: cracked shutters painted lavender, cats stretched like royalty in the sun, old women sweeping stoops as if it were a sacred ritual. "You're not here for photos," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm here because I wasn't supposed to be." She glanced at me, sharp eyes missing nothing. "Ah?" We didn't say more. Later, under a vine-covered terrace, we shared wine and bread. I told her about my garden back home, the tomatoes that refused to cooperate. She told me about students she'd loved fiercely and never spoken to again. "And your family?" she asked. "They are fine," I said, because it was the easiest lie. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from jet lag, something else. I lay there thinking of all the times I'd said it's fine, when it wasn't. The holidays I cooked for but never enjoyed. The trips I paid for but stayed behind from. How often I'd convinced myself that being needed was the same as being loved. In the morning, Rosalie knocked on my door. She held a folded map like a promise. "Florence," she said. "Why not?" I hesitated. Old instincts rose quickly. Practicality. Caution. What would they think? Then I remembered. I hadn't been asked to think at all. Why not? I repeated. We booked the tickets that afternoon. 2 women over 70, buying one-way seats. Like teenagers who trusted the future. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my daughter-in-law. Did you check the sprinkler system? It's acting strange. No, are you okay? No, where are you? Just maintenance. I stared at the screen, something inside me going very still. I didn't respond. Instead, I packed. I folded the navy dress carefully. Wrapped my pearls. Old habits from a lifetime of being. Prepared for other people's expectations. Before bed, I turned my phone off and placed it in the drawer. Silence, it turned out, could be chosen. The train to Florence rocked gently through countryside that looked unreal, golden. Hills, stitched vineyards, towns asleep in their own patience. Rosalie read. I watched. The landscape moved like a painting finally coming closer. In Florence, beauty hit differently. Not loud. Not demanding. Just present. Standing before the Botticelli, something loosened in my chest. Not awe, recognition. The quiet understanding that beauty didn't need permission to exist, and neither did I. That night, back in our small hotel room, I checked my phone out of habit. 24 missed calls. 14 from my daughter-in-law. The rest from my son. One voicemail stood out. His voice tight. Mom, we thought you'd be home. The kids are upset. Please call us. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening once. Not guilt. Not fear. Distance. The next morning, I woke lighter. And that frightened me more than the anger ever had. Because once you feel what freedom tastes like, even briefly, you start wondering how long you've been starving. And soon, they wouldn't just be calling to check on me, they'd be calling because they were losing control. Florence changed something in me, though not in a way I could point to on a map. It wasn't the art or the architecture alone, it was the way no one hurried me. I could stand in front of a fountain for 10 minutes, and no one asked what I was waiting for. I wasn't interrupting anyone's life simply by existing. Rosalie noticed before I did. You walk differently now, she said one morning as we crossed a quiet bridge. Less folded. I smiled but didn't answer. I wasn't ready to name it. That afternoon, I wandered alone through narrow streets, letting my instincts guide me. I tried on a linen skirt in a small shop and laughed at my reflection, not because it looked foolish, but because it didn't. I didn't buy it. I didn't need to. Knowing I could was enough. Later, Rosalie and I sat on a hill overlooking the city, sharing fruit and silence. Below us, Florence glowed like it had nowhere else to be. This, I said finally. This is what I missed. She nodded. Yes. Being present in your own life. When we returned to the hotel, my phone buzzed again. My son this time. Did you cancel our vacation on purpose? We got to the airport and everything was wrong. Please explain. Explain. I stared at the word. All those years I'd explained myself, why I couldn't come, why I didn't mind, why it was easier this way. How much energy I'd spent making sure everyone else stayed comfortable. I turned the phone face down. That night, Rosalie asked, where next? I didn't even hesitate. Lisbon. She grinned. Perfect. I've always wanted to hear Fado live. Lisbon welcomed us like an old friend, slightly worn, humming with music. Unapologetically alive. The sidewalks shone after rain. The air carried longing like it was something shared. We stayed in a small guest house overlooking a square where children played and old men argued affectionately. Rosalie wasn't feeling well the first day, nothing serious. Just fatigue. She waved me off, told me to explore. But I stayed. I made her tea. Sat by the bed. Read aloud from a book we'd bought in Florence. It felt different from the caretaking I'd done my whole life. This wasn't obligation. This was choice. That realization landed heavier than anything else. The next morning, music floated through the square below our balcony, raw, aching. Beautiful. I stood barefoot, letting it reach me. When Rosalie joined me, wrapped in a shawl, she smiled. You hear it too, she said. I nodded. It sounds like remembering. Later that day, I turned my phone back on. 5 new messages. My daughter-in-law again. This isn't funny, Helen. The kids are confused. You've made your point. I felt something settle in my chest. I hadn't made a point. I'd made a choice. That night, we found a small fado bar tucked between laundry-lined alleys. The singer's voice cracked in places, but it only made the truth sharper. She sang about being left behind. About standing up anyway. I didn't cry. I understood. Back at the guest house, a folded letter lay outside our door. No envelope. My name. Written in my son's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. I sat on the bed holding it while Rosalie pretended to adjust her scarf, giving me space. Without asking. Inside were 3 short paragraphs. Confusion. Worry. An accusation dressed as concern. If you're trying to punish us, you've succeeded. Please come home. No apology. No acknowledgement of being excluded. Just discomfort that I was no longer where they'd placed me. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the drawer. In the morning, Rosalie raised an eyebrow. Breakfast first, or morning mediocre? Penmanship. I laughed out loud, surprising myself. We ate in the courtyard under vines heavy with morning light. Life went on around us. Unconcerned with my family's confusion. Later, sitting alone by the river, I thought of my granddaughter. 16. Bright. 2. Aware already. The last time we spoke, she'd asked how to fry an egg and called me the egg whisperer. I typed a message. Sweetheart, I'm traveling. I'm okay. Not angry. Just needed some sky. Love you. I sent it before I could doubt myself. When Rosalie found me, she handed me a pastry and said nothing. That night, the guest house manager approached me gently. Your family called, he said. They are worried. I nodded. Thank you. Do you want to call them back? No. I slept deeply, deeper than I had in years. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to decide when my life could continue. And the longer I stayed silent, the more desperate their voices became, until the one person who truly understood finally reached out. Seville burned differently than the other cities. Not just from the heat, though it pressed against the skin like a challenge, but from the way life refused to be quiet. Music spilled from open windows. Laughter echoed off stone walls. The city didn't apologize for taking up space. I admired that. Our hotel sat between a bakery and a shoe shop that smelled of leather and dust. The courtyard bloomed with orange trees, their scent following us up the stairs. Rosalie declared the place dangerous. For what? I asked. For remembering who you were before you learned to shrink. That evening, we followed the sound of clapping into a courtyard restaurant where flamenco erupted, not polished, not performed for tourists, but lived. A woman danced with a face that held no apology, her feet striking the ground like punctuation. She's older than we are, Rosalie whispered. I believed it. And I couldn't stop watching. The next day, while sipping lemonade under a striped awning, I saw a family pass by. 2 parents. 2 teenagers. Ordinary. For a moment, the mother's silhouette caught me off guard, sharp haircut, purposeful stride. Not her. The tightness in my chest faded quickly. It wasn't grief anymore. It was recognition. Back at the hotel, my phone buzzed. A message from Amelia. Grandma, where are you now? Your photo from Lisbon was amazing. My art teacher loved it. Can I call you later? I stared at the screen. I hadn't sent her a photo. Rosalie caught my expression and smiled. I may have taken one, she said lightly. You looked like someone who wasn't asking permission. That night, Amelia called. Her voice wavered at first, then steadied. Mom and Dad think you're proving something. I'm not, I said. I'm living. There was a pause. Then, softly, I think I get it. I think I've felt that way too. We talked for 15 minutes. About school. About a boy who didn't notice her. About drawings she hid because they felt too honest. Are you coming back soon? She asked. I don't know yet, I answered truthfully. Can I see you when you do? Of course. When the call ended, I felt lighter, not because things were fixed, but because something real had passed between us. The next morning, Rosalie laid 2 train schedules on the table. Madrid. Seville. Your pick, she said. Seville, I replied. I want to see what else they said I was too old for. The city welcomed us with fire and color. That night, we wandered until we found music. Again. Not flamenco this time, but something louder, younger. A bar near the docks. Pulsed with rhythm and sweat and laughter. This place isn't meant for us, Rosalie said, amused. I know, I replied, and went in anyway. At first, I watched. Young bodies moving like they had nowhere else to be. Then I stood. Rosalie blinked. You're serious? I stepped onto the floor alone. I didn't dance well. I didn't dance carefully. I danced fully. The years fell off like an old coat. A stranger smiled. Someone clapped. I laughed. Breathless, uncontained. When we stumbled back to the hotel hours later, flushed and aching, Rosalie collapsed onto the bed. That, she gasped, was wildly irresponsible. I know, I said. I loved it. Before sleep, I checked my phone. Still no response from my son. But there was a voice memo from Amelia. Grandma. Dad keeps reading your message. He printed it. Mom says you've lost your mind. I told her maybe you finally found it. I am proud of you. I listened twice. Then again. The next morning, I tied a bright yellow scarf around my neck, not because it matched, but because it pleased me. We boarded the train to Granada, as Rosalie hummed softly. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "We are going to see the Alhambra," she replied. I hummed for architecture. I smiled, watching the countryside blur. Granada was quieter. Respectful. Like it knew its worth without announcing it. That evening, alone on the terrace, I found a message from my son. Just one line. "Mom, did we lose you?" I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my notebook. And for the first time, I began writing the things I had swallowed for decades. Because once words finally reach the page, they can no longer be taken back, and neither can the woman who wrote them. Granada asked for patience. The streets curved like secrets. The hills tested my knees. But I climbed anyway, not to prove anything, just to see it with my own eyes. The Alhambra rose slowly, stone, warmed by centuries of sun and hands that never rushed. I sat on a bench framed by shadow and light, breathing in air that smelled faintly of oranges and dust. Rosalie took a photo without asking. "You look like someone who remembered something important," she said. "I did," I replied. "I remembered I was never meant to disappear." That night, back at the inn, my phone vibrated again. A voice message from Amelia. "Grandma. Dad's starting to realize this isn't something he can fix with an apology. He's scared. I told him you're not angry. You're just done pretending." I typed back a simple reply and attached the photo Rosalie had taken. No caption. Just me, standing taller than I remembered how to be. She sent back a heart. I closed the phone and opened my notebook. The page was blank, but my chest was full. I wrote the things I'd never said aloud. I wasn't always tired. I just got tired of being unseen. Each time you called me old-fashioned, I swallowed a truth. I remember when you were 5 and handed me a rock like it was treasure. I miss being called by my name. I didn't cry. I didn't rush. I wrote until my hand ached and my breathing steadied. The next morning, we traveled to the coast. The sea stretched wide and honest, waves steady rather than dramatic. Rosalie walked barefoot, collecting pieces of sea glass. I let the water bite my toes and laughed at the shock. A couple walked past us, older than we were, holding hands without speaking. No performance. No apology. That was the life I wanted. That evening, my phone buzzed again. "Please just let us hear your voice. David." I stood at the balcony, wind tugging at my sleeve, the sea whispering something I didn't yet have words for. I opened the voice memo app. "David," I said, not rehearsing. "I'm not angry. I'm changed. I spent most of my life waiting to be needed instead of choosing myself. I love you, but I'm not coming back to the role you assigned me. If you want me in your life, it has to be as a whole person. Not a placeholder. Not a convenience." I paused. "I hope you can understand. Good night." I sent it. My hands trembled afterward, not from fear, but from release. Rosalie looked up from her book. "You said it." "Yes." "How do you feel?" Like I finally stopped apologizing for breathing. That night, I dreamed of doors opening behind me as I walked forward, never once Looking back. In the morning, there was no reply from David. But there was a message from Amelia, a photo she'd drawn. Me on the beach. Scarf lifted by the wind. The words beneath read, she remembered who she was. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Then I turned to Rosalie. Let's go dancing tonight. She blinked. Again? Yes. The bar was loud, too young, too alive, but we went anyway. Rosalie wore silver hoops. I tied the yellow scarf in my hair like a victory ribbon. I danced without waiting for music I recognized. I danced until my knees protested and my lungs burned and my laughter startled strangers. And when I finally collapsed into bed, sore and smiling, my phone buzzed once more. A message from Amelia. Dad printed your message. It's on the kitchen table. He hasn't touched it all day. Mom says you've lost your mind. I told her maybe you found it. I am proud of you. I smiled in the dark. Because pride, when it comes from someone who truly sees you, weighs more than all the guilt in the world. And just when I thought the hardest part was over, the choice I'd been avoiding finally arrived, whether to return, or to return differently. The decision didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, folded into quiet mornings, long walks by the water, and the way my body no longer flinched when my phone buzzed. I wasn't avoiding home. I was deciding how to return. Rosalie understood without asking. You'll go back, she said one evening, as we shared soup in a small kitchen in Cadiz. But not to the same place. No, I agreed. To a new position. She raised her glass. To rearranging furniture. We laughed, but my chest tightened anyway. I booked the ticket myself. One seat. Window this time. The flight home felt shorter, as if distance had lost its authority over me. I watched the clouds drift and thought of the woman I'd been when I left, careful, apologetic, already bracing for disappointment. She felt like someone I'd once known well. At the airport, Amelia was waiting. Not my son. Not my daughter-in-law. Just her. She spotted me before I spotted her and ran, actually ran, into my arms. Taller than I remembered. Stronger. She smelled like paint and peppermint gum. I knew you'd come back, she said into my shoulder. I never said I wouldn't, I replied. The drive to the house felt surreal. Same streets. Same trees. Same quiet assumptions. Hanging in the air. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach tightened, not with fear, but redness. David opened the door. He looked older. Not aged, exposed. Like someone who'd been forced to sit with a truth too long. Mom, he said. I stepped inside without waiting for permission. The house smelled familiar. Lemon cleaner. Coffee. Control. My daughter-in-law hovered near the kitchen island, arms crossed, not angry, just unsettled. You scared us, she said. I know, I replied calmly. That wasn't my intention. But you just left, she continued. No explanation. No plan. I met her eyes. I've spent my entire life explaining myself. I'm done. Silence landed heavily. David cleared his throat. We didn't mean to exclude you. The trip just happened. No, I said gently. It was planned. You just planned it without me. He looked down. I needed to remember who I am, I continued. And I couldn't do that here. My daughter-in-law's voice softened, confused. So what now? I set my bag down deliberately. Now, I live nearby. I won't be your default childcare. I won't be your backup plan. I'll come for dinners I'm invited to, not assigned to. And I'll leave when I want. David opened his mouth, then closed it. I love you, I added. That hasn't changed. But access to me isn't automatic anymore. Amelia watched, eyes shining, not with drama, but recognition. Later that night, after the tension eased into something quieter, I unpacked in the guest room, not my old room. That one no longer fit. I hung the yellow scarf in the closet like a small flag. Over the next few days, things shifted awkwardly. David tried too hard. My daughter-in-law overcorrected. Invitations came carefully, like they were afraid I'd disappear again. I didn't. I just didn't fold myself smaller to stay. One afternoon, David found me in the backyard, pruning roses. You changed, he said. I grew, I corrected. He nodded slowly. I didn't know you felt that invisible. I told you in 1,000 small ways, I said. You just didn't hear them. That night, Amelia knocked on my door. Will you tell me everything? She asked. About the trip? Yes, I said. And one day, you'll take your own. She smiled. Promise. Promise. When I lay down to sleep, the house felt different. Less heavy. Less entitled to me. My phone buzzed once more. A message from Rosalie. Did you land like yourself? I typed back. Yes. And I didn't unpack the old version. I stared at the ceiling, breathing evenly. Because returning wasn't the end of my journey. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous to the life I'd lived before. And just when they thought things would settle back into normal, I made one final decision that changed the balance forever. Normal never returned. Not the old version, at least. Life didn't snap back into its familiar shape, and I was grateful for that. Instead, it stretched, awkward at first, uncertain, but honest. I no longer filled gaps by default. I filled time by choice. I moved into a small apartment 10 minutes from my son's house. Close enough to visit. Far enough to breathe. It had large windows, uneven floors, and a balcony that caught the afternoon sun just right. I bought plants I didn't know how to care for and learned. Anyway, David helped me carry boxes, but didn't tell me where to put things. That felt like progress. I enrolled in a local art class. Not because I thought I was good, but because Amelia said, "You look like someone who should be painting." I liked that reason better than any practical one. On Thursdays, I cooked for myself. On Sundays, I joined them for dinner, when invited. I left early sometimes. I stayed late other times. No explanations offered. The first time I declined babysitting, my daughter-in-law paused. "Oh," she said. "Okay." And that was it. I started walking every morning, greeting neighbors by name. A woman 2 doors down waved like she'd been waiting for me all along. I joined a book club that argued more than it agreed. I loved them immediately. Amelia visited often. She brought sketches and questions and a hunger I recognized. We talked about art and fear and the quiet violence of becoming small for others. Does it ever get easier? She asked once. No, I answered honestly. But it gets clearer. One afternoon, David called, not to ask for something, but to tell me about his day. A small thing, but meaningful. I didn't realize how much you gave up, he said. I thought you liked it that way. I told myself I did, I replied. That doesn't make it true. He was quiet, then said, I'm glad you left. So was I. Months passed. My passport stayed on the shelf, not because I was done traveling, but because I no longer needed escape to feel alive. I belonged to myself now. On my birthday, Amelia gave me a framed drawing. Me on a balcony. Plants everywhere. A yellow scarf caught mid-air. Underneath, she'd written, she stayed. Not stayed home. Stayed whole. That night, alone in my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and stood at the window. The city hummed below, indifferent and alive. I wasn't lonely. I was present. I thought of the woman I'd been when they drove away with their suitcases and assumptions. The one who waved until the street emptied. She didn't know yet that being left behind would be the most generous thing they ever gave her. Because it forced her to move. I still loved my family. That hadn't changed. Love didn't require self-erasure anymore. I placed the framed drawing on the wall near the door, where I'd see it every time I left. And every time I returned. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. A life doesn't end when others stop noticing you. It begins the moment you notice yourself. I turned off the light, the city glow spilling softly into the room. Tomorrow, I had nowhere I had to be. And that was the most honest freedom I'd ever known.